talk to the legends of the creative and entertainment industries. We talk to those on the rise. Lance Dean Anthony Nielsen asks about the highs, the lows, and everything in between. This is Outcast Creative, and this is Industry Interviews.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us at a slightly earlier time of just after 6 p.m. on the Outcast Creative channel. Industry interview number 85. Started this 2 years ago. We're already at 85. Just 15 to go before I hit industry interview 100. Can I do it before the end of the year? We shall see. Anyway, I want to get into it tonight because we've got a really special, legendary guest. The godfather of British comics, none other than Pat Mills, a man who played a massive influence on my life growing up, although he wouldn't have realised that at the time. Now, in order to facilitate such the broad topics of questions and expertise required, I've got a couple of backup co-hosts with me who were also avid readers of the comic in their youth, the Inside Man and also Tombi. Welcome to the channel, guys.
Good evening. Thank you so much for inviting me on. And all I can say is it's more than a pleasure. I mean, an absolute honor to be here with Pat Mills, somebody who has had such an enormous influence on my childhood.
Yeah, exactly the same. I mean, I just can't echo it enough. It's just amazing.
Yeah, it's immeasurable, really. It genuinely, it's immeasurable. The kind of influence, the entertainment, and even growing up, and the social awareness that the comics that Pat had edited and was in charge of, and stories that he's written, he really kind of planted something in me, really genuinely planted something there, and yeah, my gratitude is boundless, to be perfectly frank.
Yeah, I mean, funnily enough, I remember that the first screenplay I ever wrote, which I just thought, right, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write a screenplay, was called Legion of the Damned. And it was about a whole load of vampires chasing after German soldiers on the Eastern Front of World War II. Guess where I got that idea from? 2000 AD, Fiends of the Eastern Front, which was the only World War II strip that I can ever remember being in 2000 AD with a horror bent. And it was absolutely fantastic. And I was lucky enough as well to pick up a stack of Misty comics at a car boot sale. I picked up like about 200 of these things for about 20 quid or something. And of course it was Misty for girls, but Misty was basically like Tales of the Unexplained. They had all these like Invasion of the Body Snatchers stories and really cool cool horror stories with female-led protagonists. I loved it. Thought it was great.
Yeah. I mean, my sister used to get Misty, and of course I used to thumb through that avidly as well. So Misty action 2000 AD battle.
I mean, that's another thing that Pat Mills, of course, is mostly associated with 2000 AD, but he started in the industry way before that, and of course was involved in such comics as Battle, and which then became Battle Action, sort of later in the day. And these were sort of staple diet of any young kid growing up in the 1970s, as I think all three of us did. Well, without any further delay, from his hidden volcanic base deep in the Spanish mountains, Mr. Mills is in the house. Welcome, Pat, to the channel.
How you doing, Pat?
You are now with us, Pat. Can you see and hear us? Oh my God, we can see Pat, but he's not talking to us. So I wonder if he knows he's live. Let me put him on the solo layout here. Pat, can you hear me? Testing. Oh, I think he's lost his audio. Oh dear. Can you hear us? Okay. I'm wondering if we've lost audio with Pat. Nope. Yes, Pat, you're live. Yes, we're ready. We're talking to you now.
I'm assuming it's because
we can hear you.
I'm assuming it's because he was doing an intro.
Yeah, you're live now. We've done the intro. You're on now.
Okay. Sorry about that.
We were just making the sun shine from every proverbial place of yours.
I'm so glad I missed out on that. I'm still blushing from it.
That's quite all right. So, Pat, welcome to the channel. Thanks so much for coming on. Before we talk about your latest project, which we're going to dive into first, and also cover obviously your time with 2000 AD and get your thoughts on things like the Dredd movies and stuff like that. I'm just going to ask you a few quick fire questions, if I may, to get your sense of your cultural upbringing. You know, whereas we were brought up with Star Wars and James Bond and this kind of thing, we want to know what your influences were. So what was the first movie that you saw on the big screen as a kid?
Well, that movie was called The Prisoner, and it's not the really fantastic McGowan. No, it's The Prisoner 1955, and it starred Alec Guinness and Jack Hawkins, I think. And I should explain that you were saying what you grew up under. I grew up under a theocracy, Catholic theocracy, for want of another term. So I was around 7 years old, and this particular film does actually have quite a lot of relevance to Shah, the subject of the Kickstarter. So I'll just say briefly what it was about. It was probably a private Catholic showing, maybe 2 years after the film, but it was certainly on a big screen. But my first memory, and there were other memories too, was that the film hissed and crackled and spat and flickered and all that kind of thing, which suggests it was not at the cinema, but a private showing by Catholics. And all the Catholics who watched it were so sad. It was so tragic for them because it featured a famous Catholic cardinal being imprisoned and eventually executed. Now, for my part, I absolutely love that film. And when I think of it, even today, I have to control myself a little bit, but I almost jumped for joy. I absolutely adored it because what it showed was that, well, you could say leading figures of the establishment, but particularly the Catholic establishment, could be punished for their crimes. Now, I didn't know that the guards in question were communists. Didn't know what I'm 7 years old, for God's sake. But it was brilliant because what it said to me and to any other altar boys who are watching is, we can get them. We can get these bastards. And it was like, if you're living in a theocracy, it's a bit like being in the French resistance under the Nazis. And obviously, if you think of your average, say, 7-year-old kid under the Nazis, they hide their hostility very well because kids can be quite smart. And so that was the experience for me. And I remember, I suppose, essentially thinking, one day you're all going to get yours. And I think Shah is that book. Shah picks up basically where The Prisoner leaves off, and so that's why I thought I should talk a little bit at length about it.
Well,
all right,
we'll come on to Shah in just a second when I've shot through the rest of these. But yeah, that is interesting that the first film you saw at the cinema resonated to such a degree that it had a big influence on your work later.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's certainly
fact
true.
that it still resonates today by the sound.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I'm being quite restrained in the way I'm talking about it, but yeah.
Well,
fantastic.
let's push on because I don't want to run out of time before we get onto more prevalent topics. What was the last film you saw on the big screen?
Barbie. It was terrible.
Well, let's move on.
let's quickly move on.
Let's move on. What was the my condolences on your choice, by the way.
Thank you.
What was the first comic book you ever read? And I'd also like to add to that, maybe what was your first favorite iconic comic book character, because outside of the Beano, certainly my favorite was Judge Dredd and Strontium Dog were my two favorites.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, okay, there's two answers there, really. The first comic I ever read was Cowboy Picture Library. Now, I don't know whether it was Buffalo Bill or Kit Carson, but it was one or the other. And I really didn't like it. Now, what's relevant to, I don't know, for all of us, I suppose, as to what we like or dislike, it wasn't so much that there was anything that bad about the story. It's probably a typical Cowboy Picture Library. It's probably well done. But I didn't like the person who gave it to me. And so that's why I did. And I'm sure that applies to a lot of other people, you know, who their favorite comic, they like one because it's their favorite aunt gave it to them or whatever. And so on to your second question, which was which was the one that had the most influence? Or?
No. Having sort of started reading comics, do you remember which character in whichever comic first kind of landed with you? Like, you know, maybe Spider-Man or whoever. You always wanted to read strips with that character.
Wolf the Briton by is it Ron Embleton? I think.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Wolf the Briton.
Wolf the Briton in was it?
Eagle
Express. No, I think it was an Express comic. Was it? So Wolf the Briton was beautifully done by Ron Embleton, I think. And
yes, it was. It was Ron.
Yeah. Good.
That's why I've got these two experts on here to confirm anything we're not sure about.
All right.
So, what was it about that character in particular that took to you know that you took to?
You can probably guess. He was a rebel. He was up against the Roman establishment. We'll leave it there.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think that answers everything I need to know. What was the last comic that you read that you personally didn't have any creative involvement with?
Well, I'm afraid it's still
or graphic novel.
Oh, graphic novel. I'm glad you said that. Well, it's in the same vein. Chartwell Manor by Glenn Head from Fantagraphics. And Glenn Head must have gone to a similar school to me. So I read it with absolute fascination and empathy for his experience.
I take it that's a recommendation.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely go for it. Anyone who's interested in that kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, anybody who's wants to check out Pat's Choice, there it is, and it's available on Amazon. I have to say, I do like that particular style of artwork.
Yeah, me too.
Quite common on sort of French graphic novels and things of that nature. What was your favorite TV series? TV drama series, I want to say, so and not something like Blackadder or whatever. TV drama series since the year 2000 that you know you had to binge every season. It was so good, you had to watch the whole thing.
Okay, Mad Men has to be for me.
Mad Men, good choice. Yeah. And what is your guilty pleasure movie or TV series that you can whack on a Sunday afternoon without having to think too much about it? And just
guilty's got a variety of definitions, isn't it?
That's true.
The one I've got is reasonably safe. You'll be relieved to know. But I still feel a bit odd about some of the episodes, and that's Curb Your Enthusiasm, which I'm a huge fan of. But there are parts of it that make me squirm, and where I think, God, I feel a bit bad enjoying this. You know?
It's exactly that, isn't it? I think it's designed to make us squirm. You know, with
it's
that
absolute genius.
Well,
absolute genius.
It's funny you mention it because I've got it right here. Look.
Hey.
Look at that. So, and I have not asked Pat these questions before. So, just for anybody, I just happen to have that and Flight of the Conchords on my desk, two of my favourite shows. But they also happen to help prop up my keyboard, so it's quite useful that they're there. So let's before we sort of delve into your background and how you got started and that kind of stuff, to ensure that we do not run out of time. And you referred to it already. You have a project currently on Kickstarter. It's a new hardback graphic novel called Shah by yourself and Oliver Ledroit.
Ledoir, yeah.
Ledoir. I do apologise. You can always, if you can guarantee anything about one of these, I am always going to get someone's name wrong. So the background to this, or the pitch, is using her dark arts, Shah kills the rulers of a sci-fi city, New Eden. Detective Duffy pursues her. Full color deluxe graphic novel. And you've already had 222 backers. In fact, you've already reached your initial goal, which I assume, you know, got the whole thing underway and everything. But there's still time. There's 23 days to go. There's still time for people to get involved. So tell us more about this, how it came about, who's it going to appeal to, and so on.
Sure. Well, just to preface that, I mean, we could do with as many backers as possible, because what we want to be able to do is to do a bigger print run, so that, you know, we can, get the best possible product and so forth. Okay, so, well, Shah was the first series that I did with Olivier Ledoir, and we're still working. That would have been back in the mid-90s. And we're better known, the two of us, for the series we went on to do subsequently, which is Requiem Vampire Night, which I'll just show you here. Now, Requiem is very successful.
Hold on a sec. I'll make you larger so we can see that properly. Let's just get that up on. There we go. Thank you very much. Oh, yes. I think I've seen that in Forbidden Planet, have I not?
You might have seen, if it was some while ago, Panini did an English language edition some time ago. It's out of print, but they are eventually coming back into print. This is the very latest volume, volume 12. And so it's been running for quite some time. And, well, we're very happy with it. It's Olivia is, I would say, the premier French fantasy artist today. I mean, you're probably familiar with the Maître Hurlant artists like Bilal and Mobius and Drouillet and so forth. But obviously, there's new generations of artists that came up after them. And Olivier Ledoir is really well known in France and is the natural successor to them. I mean, apart from Requiem, there's Chronique de la Lune Noire, the Chronicles of the Black Moon, and Zoko, and various other series. But we've proved a very successful team. And I met up with him in France when I was working on another series with another French artist. And he'd seen my 2000 AD work, and probably The Horned God, I would say. And I think he realized we're kindred spirits. And he said, do you want to do a story with me? And I just had a fairly spooky event, to keep it simple, which I thought would be perfect for a story. And that eventually went through various stages, but it eventually became Shah, which is a 3-volume series. And just to put it in context a bit, Olivia is so highly rated that Dargaud, who you may have heard of, the French publishers who do or did Asterix and
yeah, sure.
So they are I think they're still the #1 French publisher. So they wanted to do Shah, right? And because they loved Olivia's work, and they'd heard about me, but possibly not that much about me, because when they read the synopsis, they changed their minds. And it would we'd go down a rabbit hole to really go into the what you might call a Catholic background of that. But there was one. And moving swiftly on, we next ended up with another very important French publisher called Sláine. And the publisher's name is Mourad Boujalal, and like he didn't give a shit about the Catholic aspects of the story. And so it went there and it did well for us. And now it's with Delcourt, who took over Solae. But there's never been an English language edition. And one of the frustrations with Requiem is that we don't have the English language paper rights. We have the digital rights. So I would encourage anyone to check it out digitally. But we don't have the paper rights. And fans are always saying, oh, if only you did a paper edition of Requiem, we'd buy it tomorrow, we'd kickstart it tomorrow. And so my answer to them basically is, well, you've got something that is just as good, and for some people even better, which is Shah. And Shah, 3 volumes. We're kickstarting the first one, but it's what should we say? It's a more self-contained story. Now, I think you may not agree, but I think for British and American sensibility, there is a case for a 3-volume self-contained story, which for I was quite surprised when Olivia said to me on Requiem, how many volumes do you want it to be? And I said, oh, I don't know, 4 or 5 volumes. And he said, well, if we add this and this, it could go on to 7 or 8 volumes. And here we are on volume 13. So there's a different sensibility, I think, for French readers to some extent. So Shah, I think, is really tailor-made for an English language audience.
Yeah.
So are you saying that in your experience in the graphic novel world, the French graphic novel audience are quite happy to invest in a longer running series, whereas American and British audience tend to prefer shorter, 1 to 6 volumes kind of? Is that your experience?
Well, that used to be the case, but in the last as always in comic publishing, everything changes. And in the last, I would say, last couple of years, maybe 3 years, it's changed from these kind of what may now be referred to almost as classic bande dessinée albums. And what they're going for instead and they obviously know what they're doing. I mean, bear in mind, France is after manga, France is numero uno. So what they're doing now, and I'm not sure this is 100% rule, but I believe it is, they're going for books of, say, 100 pages or 120 pages even. One of the projects I'm involved with, we're hoping to get 125 pages. So it's one story. So obviously it commands a very high cover price. So they've moved away from those 12 volumes I'm describing, which are almost, will eventually perhaps be described as classic. And they've moved into this larger single volume concept, which is interesting. And bear in mind, the sales on these things are colossal. They are absolutely unbelievable. My tongue hangs out when I hear this. I mean, to give you an example, an artist I'm working with, his last book, which would be described, I think, as a typical traditional French historical drama. In other words, relatively conservative. So it's a single volume. So I don't know what they would be charging for that. 30 quid, maybe something like that. I have no idea, but I would guess around 30 quid. 80,000 copies sold.
Wow.
I mean, that's, breathtaking.
Yeah.
So hence my interest in working for France and bringing French products into the UK.
Why do you think that in your opinion, Pat, why do you think the French take comic books and graphic novels a lot more seriously than we do here in the UK? Why do you think that might be?
Oh, there's so many reasons, aren't there? There's that whole cultural tradition in France. Okay, I'll restrict myself to one factor, which is the French are really 150% on copyright. So on Shah and on Requiem and so forth, I own the copyright to what I do. Now, alongside other 2000 AD creators, I don't own the copyright on all those classics of yesteryear. And so if you own the copyright, it means that you go not just that extra mile, but that extra 10 miles. I mean, the artists in France are no more and no less talented than the artists in the UK or the USA or whatever, but they go the extra mile because they own their creativity. It's not controlled by an editor who might say, well, I'm sorry, Pat, we're going to get writer XYZ to take over your story now, and if you don't like it, you can fuck off. You know, that's what happens or did happen in I mean, I think to a large extent I put a stop to a lot of it by, as you probably know, speaking out very, very vocally on the subject, because if you name and shame, it shuts them up and they think twice. There'll always be somebody who will try and push it, but it would be a very brave editor stroke writer stroke artist who would cross the picket line these days.
Sure. So for somebody to get the physical hardback, how much do they have to pay to get a copy of that on the campaign?
Of Shah?
Yeah.
There's a whole series of rewards, and so you've got your basic price. So for so let me see. Okay, so we have
hardcover, £22.
22.
Right?
That's right. Thank you. Yeah. And the deluxe version is was it 37 quid? I think. Yeah. So what we have here, just so you can see it, is there's the deluxe version, which has got all kinds of wonderful additions. It's got a sort of inlay on the cover, and it's got a ribbon and so forth. So it's and it's got extras inside as well.
Right.
And then the essential hardback is also very, very good. And of course, as I say, the size-wise, it's the same as these as a classic French bande dessinée. So it's big.
It's a proper coffee table book in a sense.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, you see, the thing with by British standards, yeah. But let me just show you the artist involved. This is the French idea of a coffee table, and look at the size and the weight of that thing. I mean, this is all Olivia's work. So staggering under the weight of it.
It's an offensive weapon, literally. You can
you can
defend yourself with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm very interested to learn from, especially in modern times with modern techniques, computers, AI, and all the tools at our disposal now. From day one of, hey Olivia, let's do a comic together, or let's do a graphic novel together. Let's do Shah, to you holding a physical copy of it in your hands. How long did that take, including all the writing, coloring, artwork, everything, putting it together?
I think we're talking 1995 to 1996. Generally speaking, Olivia, when he's in the zone, will do an album a year. And that usually, so this applied to Shah as much as Requiem. So what that actually involved was, Olivia came over and stayed at my place, and we talked about the initial idea. And then he added a whole strata of ideas, which I'll come back to in a moment. And then I would go over to, he was living in Montpellier at the time. and then I go over there, and we talk about where we were at on it and how to add things. And just to really give you the flavor of things, because that's really what this is about. We went and visited Sláine, Murad Boujalal. And so Olivia explained to him how the soul of this young witch who's burnt at the stake, how it ascends through the air and it goes into a different time zone. Now, if I was writing this for, I'm being a bit facetious here, but if I was writing that for, shall we say, Hotspur or Hornet back in the day, that would be 3 pictures, right? In other words, you get on with the story. So I can still remember the shocked look on Murad's face as Olivia, and I'll talk you through this just very quickly. So you have, she's burnt at the stake here, and then her soul ascends into the skies. And then I'm watching Murad, as it carries on, and you see her soul as just a few specks of light going through the heavens. And there's a beautiful quote by Ovid about reincarnation, which I'm not going to spoil the enjoyment of that. So you've got those 2 pages, you've got 3 pages so far. And again, think of the publisher's expression on his face. And then you have 2 pages where her soul is still going through the skies, and we get to the title page.
It's very filmic. It's very sort of almost like really detailed
so pleased
storyboard.
you said that. Yeah. And so it went from there, and we're not finished yet. You see the light in the night sky, and then we're into the city of the future.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you need a roll of drums or something there. You're in New Eden, which is the mega city. And then you travel on, and even there, the cinematic storyboard effect is sustained. And the feeling of that, well, first of all, there was Murad's reaction, which was, my God, it's like 6 pages with no story. And Olivia said, but of course there is story. It's the soul traveling. We need to create that. Now, even for France, that was a very daring, exciting, and ambitious idea, and it paid off. And also because he knew how talented Olivia was, and therefore he went with it. But there's no way that you could have sold that to a British or American publisher at that time, at least.
Yeah.
And I would describe that, especially when you take into account the emotions that are being created, is the nearest we're going to get in graphic novel form to those kind of lyrical moments you get in music, where you have a particularly lyrical song like, say, Autumn Leaves, or As Time Goes By, or Who Will Buy This Wonderful Feeling? One of those things where you go, oh my God, that really gets to me. And it's the same with this. It's that same feeling. And I have to say, Olivia would have been the prime driving force on that, to try something that bold and that brave. And I would say that I think there's only been 2 artists in my career who have significantly added over and above my original storyline. There's probably someone I'm going to miss out here, but I can only think of 2. One is Olivia, and the other is Kevin O'Neill. And both them, they've added all sorts of elements that, what shall we say, make the story their own. So it's like a film director, really, isn't it? Adding their own style to the thing. So they're not just producing something like a TV movie where they're just following the author's screenplay. They're adding so much of themselves. And so I would say offhand, Olivia and Kevin would be the two who've done that, and so that's obviously why I'm so thrilled to work with them both.
So a question, if I may.
Sure.
You mentioned there that it was quite a bold and brave thing to attempt for the French audience. Do you think that there was ever a time where that would have been a successful thing in the UK?
In the context of an entire book, to have 3 or 4 pages like that would certainly be acceptable today. I think it was only in the 90s that transition from what you might call traditional comics, which had only just died, 10 years earlier, Hotspur, Hornet, all those kind of things. So I think it's more the courage, and you've got to have a lot of courage as an artist to say, I'm going to do it this way and it will work. I certainly know of some British artists who, and I'm being as vague as I possibly can now, who've attempted something similar and it hasn't worked. And there's no clues there, so I think I can say that.
No, that's fine. Before we shift topics slightly, is there anything else you want to say about Shah that you haven't said? All the links for Shah, I put it in the chat just now, but they're also in the information below. So anybody who's watching this later when it's not live, you can click on those links and get all the information. You can order your own copy from Kickstarter. There's 23 days left to go. I mean, after that, will it be effectively out of print, or will people also be able to get a print run in places like Forbidden Planet and comic shops and so on? Well,
yes and no. The deluxe version, which has all the bells and whistles, that is unique to Kickstarter. So, right. But the regular edition, this one, that will be on sale through comic shops. I think we'll probably do something with Diamond, comic conventions, the usual outlets, in other words, and of course available online. So that's the background of it. And to answer your point about what can one say about Shah, I think if as a reader you're missing the golden age of 2000 AD, and I get the very strong feeling a lot of you are, and I am too. And so and there's that whole thing of classic stories, because if you grew up with those stories, they're always going to seem a hell of a lot better than anything that's being done today. Yeah. But even allowing for that, I would say with Shah that there are some real. Shah is really the sort of 2000 AD. It's really a 2000 AD story that was never with 2000 AD, and perhaps should have been, because there's a whole raft of ideas in it that Golden Age readers will recognize from 2000 AD. We've got like futuristic death games, and it's a death game that is as horrible as anything that you may remember from Harlem Heroes. Well, I tell you, I'm not gonna spoil the surprise, but I tell you, there's a game that is so politically incorrect, and that's actually the reason I'm not talking about it.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you're not going to say it either, are you? Thank you.
No.
There's beautifully designed vehicles, crazy robots, and Dementor's space missionaries who are, and they actually came from Olivia. Because I had a basic storyline. Let me just fish this out. So Olivia came up with this. These are the crazy space missionaries, which of course are very much in the style of Torquemada, etc.
Yeah.
I had a basic plot, and essentially Olivia, in the best tradition of Kevin O'Neill, said, well, why don't you add this, and can we have that? And I'm just thinking, wow, this is astonishing. So a story which was already very well realized as a murder plot, suddenly has this extra layer of what I can only call golden age 2000 AD gloss on it.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
what I'd say you'll get with Shah. I'd be very surprised if anyone's disappointed.
Thank you very much. So what I want to do now is talk a little bit about 2000 AD's influence on films, film production, and vice versa, and also some of the attempts to get various IPs from 2000 AD made, and your views and opinions on that. One of the things that definitely want to talk about are the various attempts to get Judge Dredd. Now, I'm going to do these in reverse order from what people might expect. I want to talk about Mega City 1. Now, as soon as I heard that this was being made or being proposed to be made,
yeah.
my initial thoughts were, oh my God, please don't fuck this up. And Pat, I'm very interested to hear if your thoughts align with mine in terms of what I would have proposed for this show. Is that season 1, be it 12 or 13 episodes or 22 or however many, depending on who's financing it and how many they decide and where it's going to go and all those kinds of things. But let's say 13 episodes should really be about establishing the world of Mega City 1, the regular kind of day-to-day stuff that judges end up doing in the style of a show like The Shield, the fantastic Michael Chiklis police drama. If you haven't watched it, you should, Pat. You'd love it. It's a very full, immediate, quite violent television show about corrupt cops in LA. Not that we want to see the judges be corrupt, because I think that's the thing that makes them interesting, is that they're not. And avoid kind of doing a big, blasé, expensive storyline in season 1. Introduce the sort of the big names of Mega City 1. People like, there could be a Chopper episode, you know, the graffiti artist, and various other criminals that we've met in 2000 AD. But don't go too big. And then end season 1. Maybe your climactic episode at the end of season 1 is a judge death 2-parter, the second part of which would be your opener of season 2. And then season 2, the end of season 2 might end with a block war, which means season 3 would go into the block war, and so on. It would be that very gradual, start very small and gradually get more ambitious depending on the success of the show. What I don't want them to do is go in massive on episode 1 with a really big storyline. I think the way the show should be managed is that it should start small, and we should see what life is like for a judge for a day in Mega City 1 with those various characters that we've come to know and love. Introduce Hershey, introduce Anderson, introduce the chief judges in another episode, and so on. Build up the world that we know. Don't try and do it all in one go, and just make the whole first season a really nice world building, extremely well told, great, tight, fast paced episodes. And don't see Dredd take his helmet off, except in shadow in his quarters, but we still don't see his face. That's what I think it should be. Now I'd like to. I want to hear what.
Could I just add a quick footnote to that? If you
yeah,
don't
you
mind,
can.
I mean,
jump in.
Just quickly. I mean, I would personally, if it were me, if it were up to me, I mean, I would like to see a reflection of, you know, do exactly what 2000 AD and indeed Action Comics did, which was kind of reflect, you know, modern, you know, contemporary issues. But you know, we just have that, but make it as dark as the comics.
Oh, absolutely.
Make it as pure, certainly as pure as the comics. But you know, because there was such a high element of, I mean, 2000 AD in particular, 2000 AD was the comic that really really sparked my awareness of social issues, social injustices. In particular, that was the thing that really sparked that. And I was like a 10-year-old kid when that thing first sort of fell into my lap. And I think that any film or TV should be doing a similar thing. I think it should be a very, very current, very modern, you know, reflective kind of production. I'm not really sort of into the whole having a hero, a superhero, or your bog standard common or garden, anti-hero. There are so many other people that have ripped those things off of 2000 AD, and particularly Judge Dredd. But I would like to see something that's more, darker, grittier, dirtier, and real.
Well, that's why I referenced the TV show The Shield, because that's exactly what that is. It's that there's no grittier cop show than that ever been made, in my opinion. So, Pat, what do you want Mega City 1 to be, assuming it ever gets made? Those are our thoughts, and I'm curious to see how much yours align with.
I think with broad brushstrokes, they do align. So there's that. Without getting too deeply into it, but I think the overarching thing I would say is, and it fits what you're saying, is the stories should be by John Wagner in his earliest incarnation, right? And they have a humor and a comedy that's unique, and it doesn't matter about RoboCop or all the other stuff, or I'm thinking, for example, of there was that mobile home story, which I think there was something similar in Doctor Who, right? So I know that it's been.
I remember that.
I know his stories have been trawled a bit, because it happens with all of us. If we've been around the block for a while, there's always somebody taking an interest, shall we put it politely. But John has, and particularly at that period, had a dark sense of humor, which was sublime. And so there's, of course, the stories can still have that dark veneer, which they probably had anyway. It can have the modern elements that you've talked about, because they will, the stories can have a veneer of those to give it a relevance for people if there's something. But the ones that stand out for me are the ones with the dark comedy, like Otto Sump. Even the Oxygen Board is set on the moon, but it could easily be some star scraper, because I originally wanted those wonderful Ascara buildings to be so high that there was a shortage of oxygen at the very top. In other words, they were up into the stratosphere or somewhere. Right. So I think this idea that one can what should we say, follow in the footsteps of the master. There are occasional people who can do that, like Frank Miller, Alan Moore, and so on. But there ain't so many where 2000 AD is concerned. And I think that possibly sticks in the throats of all concerned. But having worked with John, having started with him, I know the particular subtle qualities which, even in Scotland, they're still quite special to John. And so that would be the point I would add. And I think your scenario sounds very good, although I did a double take when you got to the end of the first series and you said, so we could have Judge Death kicking it off and then leading into the next one, because Judge Death is a big subject. And how one solves that offhand, I don't know. I personally think those individual stories are pretty strong. I think once you get to Judge Death, someone like Otto Sump or the Oxygen Board, they're clearly one-offs. Now, actually, as a policy, as a creative policy, it works in comics. I can't see why it wouldn't work in film or TV. On Nemesis, for example, Kevin and I built up individual stories, one-offs, if you like, Terror Tube, Kilowatt, and so on, until we were ready to really hit the audience with the big one, the long story. I can't see why in principle, what you've described couldn't apply. So that would be my thoughts on the subject, and of course, whether it will happen or not, who knows?
I'll come on to that question in a moment. I mean, my thinking with Judge Death is, don't forget, the first time he appeared in 2000 AD, it wasn't a long story, and it was just him on his own.
That's true.
So,
yeah, was it like 3 episodes or something?
Yeah, it
2
was
or 3 episodes.
2 or 3 issues. It might have even been 2, and then he got
Yeah, could have been.
He got imprisoned in the Boeing plastic thing, and then the second time he reappeared, somebody cracked that seal. He leaked out, and he came back with his friends, which is where we had Judge Fire, Judge Mortis, and Judge Fear. One of my favorite line in Judge Dredd of all time is "Gaze into the fist of dread," and he puts the fist through his helmet. And I always wanted to see that on a TV show. So you wouldn't bring Death in with all of them. You'd bring him in on his own. He would get defeated. Yeah. And then, 2 or 3 seasons later, you'd bring him back again with the other guys.
With the entourage, yeah.
Exactly. So
I take your point. Yeah, if it's only 2 or 3, I think that's true. And you could the same would probably apply to Block Wars, where I can't recall, but I imagine that initially Block Wars were quite limited in terms of the number of episodes. And therefore, one could do those stories, but there's an intrinsic comedy about John's writing, notably in that classic period we're talking about, that still makes me laugh today. It's very unique, and it's a good thing to really imbue any TV series with.
Well, I mean, the Apocalypse War, I have to say, was just one of the most brilliantly written series of all time, because when the Block War started expanding, I remember thinking as a reader, why is this storyline going on for so long, and why is this what's happening here? And then suddenly you had that twist of an issue where you had the Russian agent, I forget his name, he was kind of like a Russian James Bond character with lots of gadgets and things, and he was poisoning the water supply and making everybody go mad, which is why the Block Wars were starting. And then that ended with that cliffhanger of them finding out that now your defenses are down, we're going to attack you. And I was like, oh my god, where's this going? And then the next thing we know, we had rad sweepers and stub guns and the sort of scythe shaped Soviet ships that were landing, the droids that would electrocute people, and then you had all these city defense teams turning up, and somebody destroyed the weather satellite. I can remember every element about that story.
Wow.
It's ingrained in me. It was so amazing. It was so filmic. And I remember reading it and thinking, my God, this has got to be a TV show one day. But you couldn't start with that. That would have to be like season 5, when the show is by now. And by that point, it would be the Game of Thrones. I mean, basically what I'm saying is, Rebellion, let me make the show for you. I know what I'll be doing with it.
It's funny you should say, because earlier in the comments I did actually mention the Apocalypse War as well as Necropolis, because both of those lines were absolutely fantastic for me when I read them as a child. But you would have to snowball up to those stories. You couldn't lead straight off the bat with it. It's too much, too big, too soon.
Yeah, no, it's got it, because you need to be invested in the world so that when you see it start getting destroyed, it really hits you. Correct. If you're not invested in it, if you haven't had all that time with Mega City 1 and the people, and you kind of care about them, you're not going to care when it starts getting mashed. Anyway, so before we move on from Mega City 1, Pat, what are the chances of us seeing this show in our lifetime, do you reckon? There's a lot going on behind the scenes. There's a lot of back and forth, and I understand it, some political and legal issues. Do we know what's happening? Okay, what can you tell us without getting in trouble?
Well, I'd certainly tell you anything I knew, because I've sort of moved on, so I don't care. But
great, spill the beans, Pat. Tell all.
Floodgates open.
Well, I can only talk from the point of view of some of my characters that have come close to being made into films, notably Sláine, but it's not the only one. And film directors would actually approach me because they would say, look, we're so frustrated talking to Rebellion that we, maybe you can help us. And I'm sort of saying, hey, I'm at the bottom of the heap, man. I'm only the writer creator of the story. But I can remember soothing some very troubled chaps, one or two really well-known directors, and they seem to have stopped in recent years. But what I've discovered from experience on Sláine, which was not a good one, was they fell between two stools, and this must have some relevance to Megacity. In other words, if this is the stumbling block on Sláine, it would be something similar, I think. So the stumbling block on Sláine was, if it's a big budget movie, studios, as you know, will often try to get all the rights, which means that they can control, all the stories and in comic book form. Now, that's not entirely true. I think, for example, the original Judge Dredd movie, that wasn't an issue. People just carried on producing Judge Dredd comics and stories and so forth. So if it's high budget, that's actually been used as an excuse. I've heard that. I've seen it in writing applying to my stuff, which is why I'm pissed off about it. And then you have the other end of it, which is if it's a low budget product. So say I'm thinking again in the case of Sláine, it's a very reputable British film production people who you would know if I was to tell you the names of all concerned, you'd know who they were.
Sure.
Anyway, it was regarded as too low budget, so you can't win. So you've got to find the sweet spot between these two things. Now, eventually, we all of us say, well, okay, we've got to. We're going to have to let one go, or we're going to have to make this the sweet spot, or we're going to have to green light this one because we want to get this underway. And what are we? 23 years after Rebellion started, and essentially, to my knowledge, that's all we have to show. Plus the Road Trooper film, perhaps, and that's a long time not to compromise. And I cite that example because I found that Rebellion don't compromise, and neither do I, which is why I walked away. It's why I stopped. But if you want to encourage talent, the publishers, I'm sorry, you've got to suck it up. You have to encourage talent. I gave you the example of Murad Boujalal, who was looking horrified at Olivia talking about all these extra pages of Shah. You've got to roll with the creators. You cannot treat them as objects, and that is the underlying problem that underpins. So it might be, oh well, the German financiers pulled out, or this, that, or the other. It's all bollocks. It's the attitude. It's the soul of it. It's the fucking soul that matters.
Yeah,
and the soul is at risk here in some way that I'm not party to how, but I know from the other examples there's something really smelly here.
Well, I mean, if you got the right team on it, there's no reason why, for example, they couldn't start with a smaller yet great IP, like do a movie adaptation of Fiends of the Eastern Front, which would make a fantastic film. World War II, vampires turning into all kinds of beasts. In the script that I wrote way back when, that parachute scene where they're all the Russians are parachuting down, they get attacked by the winged beasts. I wrote that out in script form, and just reading it was amazing. I could tell this is going to look amazing in the cinema. So I don't understand why they haven't gone, okay, we could probably make a really good version of that for 10, 15 million pounds. You wouldn't need that much money if you had the right creative team, the right director, people that knew what they were doing. Get that, smash it, knock it out the park, and boom, they've got one. Now let's make another one and go slightly bigger. And
that's it. That's the way all of us think. So, for example, I had the chance on Accident Man. It could either have been a Hollywood movie, right, with all that involves, mainly bad, but supposedly good, or I could have gone for a low-budget film bought by Scott Adkins. And that's what I went for. And now we've got 2 films that have gone, and Scott's, I think, says that there's probably a third one later this year, perhaps.
I have to say, I think it's a very good film, and the stunt coordinator's been interviewed on this channel, Dan Stiles, who did the stunts. But it's Scott Adkins is a lovely guy as well, really lovely guy.
And so if I'm faced with a choice, the relevance of this is this, that I was faced with Hollywood bullshit, right? Fronted by Dark Horse, who have previous on this kind of stuff. So so Mike Richardson was telling me, well, you know, it could be this and that. But of course, Accident Man himself, he's got to be a good guy. He only kills bad guys, which is against the British spirit of the thing. So I went for the low budget thing, and it happened. And that's how it should really work with most of these things. You start off small, and then you go on from there. And who knows? Eventually, you may end up with a mega Accident Man movie. Who knows? And the same with. I mean, if Fiends of the Eastern Front, for example, would have been a good warm-up. In other words, okay, you know, there's this whole attitude. They actually say this. They refer to Sláine, the Horn God, as the jewel and the crown, which not many jewels coming my way. But that aside, if you've got this attitude of Dredd's our jewel in the crown, so we can't risk it. Okay, we'll risk Fiends of the Eastern Front. So if it doesn't work, there's something I don't understand as well. And perhaps this is relevant to this Anglo-French thing we were talking about earlier. Okay, you've got to try it. And if it fails, so what? You've got to try. If you don't try, but it's almost like, well, we've got the drawbridge up and we're going to look very carefully at things. It's, I don't understand that attitude. I don't have a problem with failure.
No, I think risk of failure is one of the things you hit on the head. Inside Man, jump in. You wanted to ask something.
There's this massive depletion of clarity of thought and direction.
Well, Gary, you've got trouble with your audio, mate. You've got trouble with your audio. Log out, and log back in again. He's always got problems with his connection. While we're waiting for Gary to sort his audio out, let me just jump on and ask another question. So,
all right,
one thing that happened, I remember this very clearly in the 1980s, was there was a double-page spread in 2000 AD with a proposed Dan Dare TV series announced, and there was a still of an actor in a costume and everything, and Dan Dare and Judge Dredd were my 2 favorite stories at the time. I was a massive fan of Legion of the Lost Worlds, of which this is one of the covers, of which I have the original in a box in the shed. I've also got this version, which is a very heavy book, and I've also got the second one, which has got all the storylines that I don't like. So, just being honest, the first stuff up until we got the Mekon back in. As soon as I got the Mekon back in again, I completely lost interest. But this, I thought we were going to get a TV series of this. This Legion of the Lost World story, and I couldn't wait to see those spaceships that were designed with all the guns and stuff. What happened with that? Because it was announced that it was coming, and then nothing. And just...
Oh Christ! Again, that would be a little bit after my time, because That would be, from memory, that would be Brendan McCarthy and Brett Ewings, who would have been doing the designs for that. And the designs look fucking brilliant. They look really cool. But I think Dan Dare, we were talking about rebellion and this 20-year period where, your tongues are hanging out for something to happen and it never happens. Well, Dan Dare was like that. Even before, I won't go into it in too much detail because it's a divergence, but even before 2000 AD came out, we were talking to a backer about a Dan Dare movie, even at that early point. So it's rebellion all over again. In other words, Dan Dare. So that was one. Then John Wagner and we were sort of commissioned to do a Dan Dare treatment with Dan Dare starring. Oh God, I can't remember it. Gareth Hunt, is it? The guy who was in Upstairs, Downstairs.
Really?
Oh no, he looked pretty cool at the time. I met him and everything. Yeah, but okay, forget Upstairs. I think it was Gareth Hunt. I think it was. Yeah, he was in the New Avengers.
Yep. New Avengers. Yeah.
That's right. Okay.
My parents met him at a house party one time.
Right.
Yeah, my mum was quite enamored with him. So yeah, he was quite a charming guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we did we had a meet with him. This would have been maybe 18 months after. About 18 months after 2000 AD had come out. This was John Wagner and myself. And then I think it probably went on for other versions, and including the one that you've mentioned, which was probably by no means unique. And even today, for example, the Dan Dare Corporation, whoever they are, it's probably some rich individual. He won't give the green light to publish all the Dan Dare stories in New Eagle, which will be after your time, or you probably didn't like them, but let me tell you, by Ian Kennedy, some of them were bloody good. There was some great artwork there. So it's quite frustrating for me.
I liked them. I just didn't like the storylines with the Mekon. I just didn't like the Mekon as a bad guy.
We're talking in New Eagle rather than 2000 AD.
New Eagle was the one that also had the photo stories with Doctor Doom or whatever his name was.
That's right. Yeah,
killed people and changed their identities. Yeah, I did have a whole load of issues of that.
So the bottom line there really is that, you guys know this probably better than I do, being actually in the movie industry, that the number of changes and so on, it just goes on forever. It can't be unique to Bad Luck for Dredd, Bad Luck for Dan Dare. If I think of martial law, similar things, umpteen options that didn't happen, etc., etc. So perhaps it's just the industry is even more fucked up than I realize.
I think I can safely tell you, working in the industry, that it is entirely as you would assume.
I feared as much,
if not more so. Interesting that you met martial law. I just want to read this out from RRTNZ, who's one of my moderators on the channel. He says, "Pat, you legend. Every time someone raves about the boys, I tell them martial law did all that and more, but in a much smarter and more nuanced way in 1987. Love Judge Dredd and Nemesis. Thank you, sir." And then he goes on to say, a question probably been asked many times, but what does it say about the human condition that Dredd, a satirical ultra-authoritarian, albeit a principled one, is widely loved and revered as a hero? That is a good question.
Yeah. There's a long answer to that, so I'm gonna
give me the short version. If you can.
I'll try. Okay, the short version is that Dredd, like the proper way to create a character, is the way that I described on Shah, where Olivia and I met up numerous times, etc. Dredd was created in a hurry, and
Yeah.
So the problems with it, the things that aren't quite right, the glitchy bits, etc., the contradictions in his character, they're not some sophistication by knowing authors. They are part of the rawness of it. I mean, for example, The Cursed Earth is a completely different Dredd, which was actually more popular than the Megacity Dredd. Now, that actually choked a lot of the editorial at the time, because The Cursed Earth shows Dredd as a hero, or more or less, at least. So these things, these irregularities in the character, come because there isn't the required period of development that you need, and I insist upon, and which they just tell me to fuck off, so I fucked off. Because I think you need, on any new character or any new shift in a character, you need a 6-week period of development for the writer and artist. And obviously that has to be, why should the writer and artist take a dive on that? Why should they subsidize a wealthy publishing company or a wealthy publisher, at least? I'm not in the business of subsidizing him. No. It's... So I just move on. So the irregularities in the character that you've highlighted, that's where they come from, because we sold all the rights. So you don't have that opportunity to step back. Is that a short answer?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, one of the things that was very evident with Dredd, is, the Dredd that you have in the Robot Wars, for example, is very, very different from the Dredd that you have in the Block Wars and the Apocalypse War and the Judge Child series. And so, he was very much, as much as some people might see him as a fairly basic one-dimensional character, there's actually a lot more to him than that. And he really did evolve over time. And I think you're right. It's the same with scripts. It's always better to have characters developed properly in a TV show, for example, over the first season, is when you get to know everybody, and getting the pilot of that season perfect is absolutely essential. So we're talking about the same process, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I mean, I would completely agree with that. During your time on 2000 AD, do you have a sort of a favorite comic strip of all time? And Inside Man, do you want to check your mic again, because you were cutting in and out earlier, which is why we had to cut your question.
Yeah, can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, you're fine now. You were very choppy.
Sorry about that.
So jump in after this if you had a question there. But
sure.
So okay. Pat, for you on your time on 2000 AD, what for you are the stories that stick out that you really love, particularly ones that you might like to see being adapted into a movie? And I'm glad you've called Sláine, because there was this kid at my school who always used to say, "You're saying the name wrong. It's supposed to be Sláine.
Sláine.
It's pronounced Sláine."
It's my fault because of the accent. Once again, my excuse for that is that you don't think ahead. You know what I mean? You think, oh, well, an accent would look good on there, but you never think the day's going to come where someone's going to say, so how do you pronounce it exactly?
but your pronunciation of it was Sláine, right?
Well, it's because I was looking for that Celtic magic, and I came across the fact that the first High King of Ireland was called Sláine, and obviously, although I'm half Irish, half English, and I think the English half of me got the better that day, and that's what happened. I think, I mean, I wrote all the stories for Prog 1 because it was easier to do it that way. So in terms of affection for those stories, I have great affection for all of them, really. But the one in particular that really stands out for me would be Flesh. And that comes up actually there was a period of time where Rebellion were planning to do their own TV series on Flesh. And I won't go into what went wrong because it's just a repeat of what went wrong on Judge Dredd. So just imagine the same.
We'll assume much of the same. Yeah.
Exactly. But Flesh, I had a huge affection for because it was saying something, I think, very important. It had elements of Hookjaw, which, you know, fans to this day, and rightly so, have huge affection for, and wasn't created by me. I, if you like, developed it. That's another subject we should ignore because it's too big a rabbit hole. But so I originally came up with Shako, Polar Bear, because I wanted something like Hookjaw, and I thought, no, wait a minute, Polar Bear's good, but it's 7 out of 10. I want 10 out of 10. And Flesh, primarily by Ramon Sola, although that's a little unfair on Boyks, the other artist, is 10 out of 10. And it says something. It still speaks to me to this day, because it's bloody hard. And you'll know this as a filmmaker, to portray true evil in the world, which is largely corporate. And how do you portray these guys? Because they're so faceless. But there I managed to do it on Flesh, and I'm still thrilled that I did. And I think it says something that I don't think is fully understood to this day. There was a later editor of 2000 AD, Richard Burton, who said to me, so what happens at the end, Pat? Does Old One Eye gets killed by the humans in the final reel, you know, like in King Kong? And I was really quite shocked, because I thought everything that I'm evaluating here, which is to challenge the status quo, let's call it punk for want of another word,
sure,
he's missed the point. That the whole point is nature wins. And that's why King Kong, brilliant films as they are, they suggest humans beat nature, which is not the case. And so Flesh is saying something, I think, truly profound. And it's saying it without, I'm often accused of being polemic, which I know I can be. But I think Flesh managed to say it with a relatively light touch. So I'm particularly proud of that story.
Yeah, you certainly could make that into a TV show now, because the technology, you know, after we've seen things like Jurassic Park and stuff, would be there. That's another one that's you know, big. I mean, as a kid, of course, when you guys started writing Flesh, you have to remember that the films that we'd been hit with, this is just before Star Wars. You're talking The Land That Time Forgot, The Valley of Guanji, The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, all the Ray Harryhausen stuff that we had on TV. And of course, every kid was running around trying to get plastic dinosaurs at the toy store, you know, or big books on dinosaurs. And I just remember when I was like 5 or 6, dinosaurs was it. It was all the rage until Star Wars came out. Dinosaurs were the thing. You had your dinosaurs battling your ethics soldiers. So Flesh was basically that for us.
Yeah, that's why I had to kick out Shako and make it a second wave story. It was a hard decision, because I had to look at my own stories and say, it's not that this story is wrong, but it's only 7 out of 10. We want 10 out of 10. And I knew dinosaurs would tick all the boxes with
get you there.
And then making sense of it, this crazy idea that they've gone back to farm the dinosaurs for their flesh. Yeah.
Trust me, you made the right decision on that. Now,
Thank you.
Going back to Dredd, curious to hear your thoughts on the Carl Urban Dredd 3D, which came out and unfairly got compared to a film that just happened to be set in a tower called The Raid. But apart from that, the two films were not remotely similar. I always thought that was stupid nonsense. I did really like this version. I kind of like some elements of the production design, slightly more on the Stallone version, but the characterization and Carl Urban's performance, I thought was spot on. I know he was interested still in doing the TV show, certainly for a long time, probably would still take it if it was on offer. What were your thoughts on it? Did you get invited to the premiere in the UK or anything like that?
No. I think it's very much a sign of the rebellion era, is that creators generally have been marginalized by comparison with the Egmont era, which is certainly worthy of criticism. But no, with rebellion, there's a definite stepping back from the creators, which at its best is coldness and indifference, and at its worst is a singular lack of respect, as I have described to them on several occasions and suggested solutions, which of course they just fucking ignore me. So that answers your red carpet question there.
How did you like the movie though?
I think all the things that fans felt about it, I think, are absolutely true. I think I can see why it would appeal to so many fans. I think the complexity, which I sort of understand, but I wouldn't know the fine print on it, where you have this problem where something can appeal to fans, but is it going to appeal to the kid in the street who's never heard of Judge Dredd? Now, arguably, that applied to Watchmen, and which I kind of liked. I mean, any film which shows superheroes in padded cells with straitjackets has got my vote. But you know, I think it's one thing to say, well, it ticked all the boxes, or ticked enough of the boxes for fans. And that's quite good going, because fans are pretty critical. They were very critical, obviously, of the first Dredd movie. But is it going to appeal to, what's their audience? Who have they got to make money at the box office with? What is it? I'm guessing now 18, 19-year-old kids up to say 25, something like that, in the States, who may not have heard of Dredd. So they've got to compensate for that by having certain factors in there. And I don't think it ticked those boxes enough. I know it's more complex than that, but that's my feeling. And I also think, and of course it's easy for me to say, that the idea was that humor was off the books because of RoboCop, because RoboCop had filched a lot of. I'm not sure I buy that either, because I think John's humor is unique, and I personally don't think that Frank Miller or anyone else can. I mean, I've already sung John's praises, so there's no point in repeating that. But I think that's a factor. I would have liked to have seen some of John's humor. That's the thing that, I mean, you know this yourself as a movie guy. You look for the USP. What's the unique selling point?
Yep.
Now, the USP is very threatened in that second movie. What's the unique factor? And that's a bit challenging, I fear. Now, the writer director, he went on to make that film I really enjoyed. I forgot what it's. Is it a civil war in the United States?
Oh yes, yes, that's right.
That had some really dark comedy in it. Alex Garland, is it?
Alex Garland.
The director of Dredd 3D was Pete Davis, not Alex Garland. Alex Garland co-wrote the script.
Right,
although Alex Garland
he went
really
on
was
to, did he write and direct some Civil War or something?
He did the Civil War.
I thought that there were elements in that, because I mean, I was just watching it on whatever it was, Amazon or Netflix, without really looking at the credits, which I know is naughty, but I just thought I should give this a shot. And then I thought, actually, I'm really enjoying this. This is funny. It's dark. It's got a kind of vaguely 2000 AD humor. I can't remember the details now, but I remember enjoying it. And I thought, so when I looked at the credits, and I suddenly thought, hey, this is the guy involved with the movie Dredd.
Yeah.
So I think there's some intangible factor missing. And in this conversation, I've just kind of perhaps pointed to what it might be. But I think there were, everyone knows it was a really worthy effort that fans loved. But I think we've got to also look at what's that intangible thing that was missing? Because there must have been something missing. It can't all be down to the wrong time of year, the fact that 3D movies were out of vogue or whatever it was. I mean, all those things contribute, but I think it's the missing thing. That's what I would be looking for if I was, God help me, in that reluctant position.
My take on that is I think that the villain, as good a job as Lena Headey did, I think the villain in the piece, or the central antagonist or antagonist plot, whatever that may have been, should have been something recognizable from the comic, done really well.
That comes to the same point, really, that I'm making. I think, yeah.
And I think that might have been what was missing. All the elements were there. It felt like a Mega City 1 that we could believe in. It was, the look of it was slightly wrong, the aesthetic look, but I think they
could get away with that.
Yeah,
I mean,
they went for
the
what it would have.
Volkswagen and all that stuff. Yeah.
They got rid of the kind of the slope-shaped buildings and whatnot, but that was a minor thing. I think the portrayal of the judges, all of that stuff was really accurate. The storyline with was it Hershey that was with him? I forget. That was done. That was done really well. But I just think the antagonist should have been somebody iconic from the comic, and I think that might have. Oh, it's that. Yeah, I want to see Dredd fight that person. You know, maybe that was what was missing. That's the only thing I can.
But then if we have
it's
something
that's
from the comic,
and of course, coming back then to the original Dredd, that too was a shame for so many reasons. Because you were saying to me earlier that you were on the set, you were an extra.
I was. Yeah.
Wow.
And Inside Man was on the set as well. We were both there.
Right. Well, that must have been a thrill. It was certainly a thrill for me because Kevin O'Neill and I were invited on the set, and we saw one of the scenes with Sylvester Stallone. And I just remember absolutely adoring the walking around Mega City. And
the set was amazing.
The set was incredible. And I was thinking, wow, this is so brilliant. This is such genius. And so it was sad that I mean, I know some of the explanations for why it didn't work, or it didn't work well enough. And there's probably about, I don't know, probably half a dozen reasons, aren't there, why it didn't work, ranging from Stallone taking his helmet off to various other things.
Too many cooks, and them doing a massive recut, taking all the violence out. Those were two of the.
Yeah,
I know. Danny Cannon. He had a breakdown, didn't he? Danny Cannon had a mental breakdown on the set, pretty much. When
I could imagine that happening, because I think directors must feel the strain even more than writers. That's one of the advantages of being bottom of the heap, being a writer. You don't feel quite so emotional when a film goes belly up, because I've been involved as a writer on I know several film projects that have gone belly up, and I always got the feeling that the directors really get the worst end of the shit, you know. But for the writer, it's still a bit of blow. But if you've done it right, as I regularly do, you make damn sure you get paid. So it's not the same, because you still, part of your soul is in that production.
Yeah.
But at least you got the money, so that helps.
Jump in,
Stallone,
jump in, mate. Jump in, mate.
Yeah, sorry. So I was going to say Stallone was
Yeah.
asked, why he thought the Dredd movie had failed, the Judge Dredd movie had failed.
I wonder if I should press the play button. Yeah.
No, we can still hear you. We can still hear you.
Okay.
It's fine.
All
yeah,
right.
you're good.
Okay.
You're good. You're good. Sorry, Gary, go ahead, mate.
Yeah, so Stallone was actually asked some years later why he thought that the Judge Dredd movie had actually failed. And he said, I don't know. He said, he said it kind of happened pretty much on day one. He said, I knew that it was going to be a little bit of a failure. And when he was asked why he thought that on day one, he said, well, I got into my costume and I walked out on set.
Waiting?
And oh, sorry, Pat.
Can you not hear Inside Man, Pat?
No, I can't hear a word. No.
Oh, crikey.
Inside Man, I can hear you, but
yeah, same.
Well, Pat can't. So Inside Man was
I
saying,
can hear a second voice there, but I can't hear Inside Man.
No, that's me and Tombi. So Inside Man was basically saying that Stallone was asked why the movie was going to be or why the movie failed, and Stallone said he knew the movie was going to fail from day one. On set,
but of course, the reason he said that was that he said that he got the costume on. He was all dressed up.
Blank again.
Oh no,
it's all right.
No, Pat, we're just relaying.
We're just relaying what Inside Man is saying to you. I was just listening for the next part. It's a little bit frustrating.
And he said, and what he said was,
that's really. I'll just comment and just say how sad that is that. Stallone knew it was going to stiff.
Yeah, and it was all to do with the costume. He said that he walked out on the set with a costume, and he wondered why nobody was laughing. He said he was waiting for everyone to laugh, and Stallone seemed to have thought that because it was a comic book movie or a movie based on a comic book character, that he thought it was supposed to be a funny comic book character. And he was curious as to why everybody wasn't laughing, that nobody laughed at him in his costume.
Did you catch that, Pat?
No, I didn't hear a word.
So basically, and I've heard this from other sources as well, what went wrong was that Stallone thought when he put the costume on and he walked onto set, everybody should be laughing at him because he thought that the movie was basically a slapstick comedy. And he didn't understand that it was supposed to be a serious movie with dark tones. And I just don't think he really got it. He clearly hadn't sat down and read the comic. He might have quickly grabbed a couple of issues, but, and there
was clearly no research done.
I mean, he was a very different person back then to who he is now. I think he's, like a lot of the big stars from back in that era, they have matured and changed and recognized back in the day they had a bit of an ego and maybe threw their weight around too much. And I think if he made I'm not saying he should be the man doing it, he'd be quite good as chief judge actually, but if he was on a set for Dredd today, he'd probably have a very different understanding of what the movie should be. But
and again, this of course comes back to that irregularity. It's like a stone in the shoe of Judge Dredd, and it's still there to this day. Now, you could argue that many comic book characters have a stone in their shoe. In other words, there's something that doesn't quite work or is a bit strange, like, I don't know, Bruce Wayne not having much of a fulfilled private life, spending most of his time being Batman. You could argue as a stone in the shoe. But I think in the case of Dredd, there is something more intrinsic. And it's sad that it tripped us up there. But I do think that played a role. It's why if John Wagner had had the time to sit down and say, okay, we've got 6 weeks to talk about this character, to kick it around with Carlos, and let's try one version, or you give me your version and I'll tell you why I think it might need a little tweaking. But we didn't have that time. Everything was done on the hoof, and that's why the uncredited guy on Dredd that I always make a point of crediting really because I should make the effort, but fuck it, nobody else seems to give a shit, is the guy who came up with the initial structure. I'd written the initial Judge Dredd, and I decided it wasn't quite good enough, and I relegated it to the second story. And then meanwhile, along came this guy, Peter Harris, who came up with this amazing infrastructure to Dredd. Now, he's long passed away, and I don't think his widow is aware of it or whatever. But really, you know, I don't know whether rebellion or fans, or why should it be the responsibility of fans? It's Peter Harris created the infrastructure, and Kelvin Gosnell and I looked at it and we said, fuck, this is great. It was the bit that was missing in my story. It was the bit that was missing in John Wagner's story, and it gave us an infrastructure. And as I say, I still feel vaguely guilty that I haven't, I don't know, said more about it. Perhaps that's why I'm talking about it now.
No,
but,
I think it's great that you're giving him a mention, and I'm frantically trying to find a picture of him so I can pop him up on the screen. When you say the infrastructure that he created, do you mean that he sat down and said, okay, so there are things like the halls of justice, and the rookies have to go through this, and this is typically what happens to a judge, and these are the kind of sentences? Is it that sort of background minutia that he covered?
It was prior to that, but it was the same thing, in as much as prior to Peter, I'm not sure we actually had judges plural. So Peter, I mean, obviously I was briefing him, and I was briefing other writers as well, and I was getting back their versions and thinking, you know what, this hasn't got the feeling. John had absolutely understandably walked off the set. And so I thought, okay, I'll write something. And I thought, well, you know what? It's got all the symptoms, but it hasn't got the disease. And then along came Peter, who had, I think, the Hall of Justice. And he had the idea of the mutants sending this dead judge back to the halls of justice, chained to his motorbike, which was had AI, and it was something along those lines. And then Kelvin and I added what you might call a satirical twist at the end of it, as the punishment for the mutants. But that initial spark came from Peter, and I remember being absolutely overjoyed by thinking, that's what's missing in my story. That's what's missing thus far in John's. And I was so thrilled. So I always make a point of talking about Peter. Well, I mean, he's long past. I think he was a children's author, and a most unlikely guy to have come up with such a great infrastructure, because he'd previously done some work for John and I on Battle, which was not ticking the same boxes, shall we say.
Well, maybe if the Mega City 1 TV series ever happens, they could honor him some way.
That would be nice. That would be really nice.
Having a block named after him, or even just accrediting him as one of the, sort of creators, without having to necessarily give any financial remuneration. I just think honoring him in some way would be very appropriate.
I think it would be nice to honor him. I think that would be great for his widow. And I think one of the things that I try to do, not always as best I can, is I try to acknowledge the role of developers, because I think where science fiction is concerned, often you need a developer to sort of add some extra ingredient. Mm-hmm. So, for example, in my forthcoming Hellbreaker from Spacewarp, the character of the cop, who's an old-fashioned Sweeney type, actually comes from someone else. And I've always made a point of acknowledging that in the original Spacewarp, and I will do on the... we need to create this idea that if you're a developer, I mean, it's known, I think, in Batman, isn't it? I can't remember the guy's name. Alongside the main Batman creator, you've got Bill Fingerman, is it? I think who was the developer, or perhaps even the co-creator of Batman. I don't know.
Mm.
But it's the idea that if you add a significant extra character or detail, that should be acknowledged in perpetuity. And it's not too difficult in today's age of, computers and everything. You can factor it in and say, okay, well, this guy deserves, 1% because he's created whatever it is.
Yeah.
And we are still living in the boondocks. We're still living in the Stone Age, where these things are concerned. And as I've exampled, in France, they are really on the ball on these things. And they say things in the contract which are very generous, which you don't expect from publishers who sort of normally regard creators as convicts or something. They say, we will review this clause, and if it needs updating or changing because of the changes in digital technology, we will review this in a couple of years. Now, that's really generous, and that's the soul of creativity. And that's all we really want, is for, if we throw some extra element into a story, it should be acknowledged. And of course, in Britain, we're still living back in the days of DC Thompson's and Commando.
Before we begin to wrap up, and I will check to see if there's any questions in chat that we haven't answered. Tombi, did you want to jump in and just ask Pat something?
Yeah, so let me just pull up my questions.
Just pull up my list of 200 questions for Pat.
Mate,
bearing in mind we have gone over time, so I don't want to keep. I don't want to keep him on. He's been very generous with his time here. I just don't want to keep him on too much longer. But if you've got that urgent question you always wanted answering, ask it now.
Yeah, so obviously I grew up in the 80s, not in the 70s. So I actually hit the comics later than most of the rest of the guys. But that being said, so I started picking up my first comics around 87, 88 onwards. And the stories and the comics that I was reading at the time made me go back all the way to the start, to basically the year I was born. And that gives me the annual for 1979, which is absolutely fantastic. But the question I would like to say is, many of the characters, Sláine, Nemesis, have become really iconic for all of us. What was your process for creating such enduring and complex characters?
Hey, well, I think it's hinted at in that very first question that was asked, which was, what was the first movie you watched? And I think the answer is that, and this is true for all writers, but I think it's particularly true for me, is you're driven by what can be called the muse. So you have an axe to grind, literally in the case of Sláine. So it's getting in touch with something within you that you need to write about. Now, it doesn't have to be, what should we say? Oh, God, that's off limits. I'm not going there on that. We're not opening Pandora's box. I think Pandora's box is the place to open, because it's a great source of material. And I've made, although it's not my prime motive, I've made a lot of money from pursuing and exploring, what shall we call it, the slings and arrows of misfortune in life. So Nemesis is clearly based on not just my experiences of the Catholic Church, but Kevin's. Bless him, I'll never know the full extent of, I mean, I'm a fairly open book on this. So that's one example. In the case of Sláine, it's something akin to it, because it's saying, look, we should be pursuing a goddess religion. You don't have to be some weird satanic cult, but why are you worshipping a god? You know, a male god. It's absurd, and it's also pursuing my Irish roots, the Irish, wonderful Irish paganism that I didn't know about as a kid. So you can see that pattern is repeating itself in Sláine, in Nemesis, and of course in Shah as well, because once again, it's pursuing these themes that I was starting to become aware of as a young child, and then developed all my life. So that that it repeats itself in various shapes and forms, some more successfully than others, perhaps, in just about all my other stories.
Well, it's been absolutely fantastic to listen to everything tonight. So, from me personally, thank you incredibly for jumping on and obviously answering the question. More questions from obviously the chat and certainly Inside Man and Lance, but thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's. I mean, this is. I'm going to be buzzing for a couple of hours when I come off of here, and I'm supposed to be going to a day rave tomorrow. So you know,
it's why I've been silent for almost 2 hours. I've just been gobsmacked listening to it. It's fantastic.
Indeed. Inside Man, did you have a quick question before?
Well, it's funny because Pat had kind of just answered pretty much what I was going to ask about the inspiration for things like for Sláine and Nemesis. I mean, these are two of my absolute favorites. I mean, these were real particular favorites, and these were two that did provide this social awareness or awareness of certain things within society that I thought I might need to sort of educate myself in. So this was kind of these were the two that really sort of planted a seed and would probably.
I couldn't hear the question, but I'm guessing you did.
Inside Man is saying that Sláine and Nemesis were the two for him that really planted seeds and got him to ask questions about things. Inside
That's
Man,
great.
Inside Man, what's your question? And I'll pass it on quickly.
One of the things that I would like to ask is, Pat's literary influences on, I know it's an all-encompassing thing, but his literary influences over the majority of his work. What would you say they would be?
So, Pat, Inside Man's question is, what would you say the key literary influences were during your period of work, particularly on the stories for 2000 AD? So what were you reading that was influencing you?
Right.
So creatively, I suppose.
Okay. I don't think there was one single book.
No, I mean, it may have been, and he did say this is a bit of an all-encompassing question, but it may have been that there were several books, but mention a couple, perhaps.
I would say Harry Harrison, War with the Robots, and I think he has some kind of comic book background that I don't fully understand, but I think Harry Harrison definitely, and then I think. From the point of view of Sláine, the Toyn, Tain, by Thomas Kinsella, or actually I pronounced that wrong as well. Kinsella, I've been told by my Irish colleagues, is how it should be pronounced. Thomas Kinsella. So that was a key source on Sláine. Where Nemesis is concerned, I think by and large, it actually came entirely from within me. When I think back on it, I don't think there was really any major. I was so riffing, and obviously that comes through to the readers, and it's a real Lennon and McCartney thing with Kevin O'Neill, who also had a Catholic upbringing, and I think we just riffed with each other. So there was no source where Nemesis was concerned. Maybe the odd art source later on, but that's secondary to the story thrust. And I would say, for example, in the case of Nemesis, I remember thinking, I have no idea why these Terminators are behaving like this. So I'm going to have to go for a very long walk and make sense of it. And I remember walking round and round this park, which was quite weird because everybody who walked around the park normally had a dog with them. So here's this weird guy walking with long hair.
You were looking highly suspicious.
Highly suspicious, yeah. Muttering to himself and avoiding other people. And after maybe 2 hours, that's my recollection, the idea came to me in a flash that the Terminators, this be pure, be vigilant, behave refers to aliens. They want to clean up, they want to cleanse the galaxy of every deviant form of life. And I can remember almost being knocked sideways by thinking, wow, what the fuck, you know? And it really, because up till then we were just riffing on the story. We had no idea, and you know, for a long, long time, why were these people so evil? And this idea just hit me out of nowhere with no literary reference or anything. Torquemada later had a certain literary reference, more from memory than anything else, from Wilkie Collins' The Moonstone, where there's a wonderful character called Miss Clack, who, and I've talked about it in my Substack blog, she definitely inspired me. And I remember reading her as a kid and thinking, my God, what a demented, raving bitch. One day I've got to do something with this character. So perhaps she crept into Nemesis somewhere.
Yeah.
I know we've gone well over time, so I want to let you go, but I'll just turn to chat who've got a few quick questions. So
no, that's fine. Absolutely fine.
We're okay.
I'm in gear now, so go for it.
Okay. We won't take that literally, but all right. So I'll get through as many of these as I can.
Go for it.
So Abe asks, what's Pat's hope for future live action projects? I mean, we've kind of covered that, but if you could see one that would definitely go ahead, let's say I won the lottery tomorrow and I had a word with Rebellion and they said, okay, Lance, we'll give you one and you can go away and direct it. And I came to you and said, okay, Pat, let's make a 2000 AD IP for under £20 million. What one would you like me to go away and make?
Oh, it's got to be Sláine, hasn't it? Really?
Yeah,
got to be Sláine, I think.
So I'm making a Conan film, basically. So you know, that would be my interpretation of it. It's like Conan, but Conan in Scotland.
I think Sláine would be a great
that would
kind
be
of Game
one
of Thrones
way of approaching it, and that would be as valid as some of the other propositions. I mean, at the end of the day, every director is gonna go for the Horned God. It doesn't matter what you or I say. The financiers are going to say, never mind Mike McMahon's Sky Chariots or Angela's original opening episode. The Horned God is where it took it to another level. And you're not going to, you know this better than I do. You're not going to convince the financiers to do anything other than the Horned God.
Well, if I win the lottery, I'll give you a ring and we'll demand a meeting with Rebellion. Grumpy Grognard Gaming asks, if there was a Charley's War TV show, I did love Charley's War, which actor would you like to play Charley?
Oh, God. That's a tough one because we're talking about a 17-year-old boy, aren't we? 16, 17, 18-year-old boy. And I'm not up to date on any of the what shall we call them, the current teenage idols or in TV. I suppose I would probably look at some of the series that have followed Grange Hill all the way through to today. What maybe God, what's that series? Sex Education. I would look at some of the guys in that. There's bound to be, even Sex Education is possibly just over the horizon now. There's probably something else that's taken its place. It's a very quick moving market, isn't it? You know?
I mean, the funny thing is, you could cast Isa Butterfield because he still looks like he's 12 years old, you know, but he's in his I think he's in his 20s now. I mean, it's funny that the first name that came immediately into my head was just for the look for Charley was George McKay, and of course he played one of the leads in 1917, which I forgot.
I remember 1917. Yeah. Well, 1917 worked pretty well. Yeah. So it's a
clever movie.
Yeah.
So okay, so I'll just see if there's any more here. Just shooting through. Question. Here we go. Was Wolf the Briton an inspiration for Sláine? I think you answered that earlier. I think you said it kind of was. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Well, a very early inspiration, because here was a guy who was a Celt who was taking on the establishment and knocking hell out of them, which is roughly what Sláine does.
Yeah. So there's a question from Tom here, is that 2000 AD compared to what it was has now sort of gone a bit more mainstream. Do you think that's a bad thing? It's not as underground as it felt back in the golden era, I suppose, is where he's going with that.
Well, I suppose what you have to do is you've got to say what's selling at the box office.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know the exact details because I don't read 2000 AD every week. So if I make any comment, I'm sure that they're going to be readers of 2000 AD today, and I'm delighted they're there, who are going to say, no, that's not true. But based on my very limited knowledge with that qualification, I get the feeling that there isn't the same, what should we call it? How do you bottle it? Punk, anger, anti-establishment quality that fueled those early 2000 ADs. It's hard to see how it's there with that same ferocity and that same energy. Now, of course, someone's going to correct me and say, well, no, it is there on such and such a story. But I think it has to be there. And I think it has to appeal to a newsstand audience. It's something we haven't talked about, and I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole too far. But the newsstand audience is the one that I absolutely adore. And if I'm probably going to say something that's complete heresy to a lot of guys, but fuck it. If I had to choose between a comic shop audience and a newsstand audience, I would go for the newsstand audience every time, because they are ordinary, whatever is ordinary means, ordinary kids, ordinary adults who are not comic buffs and who just say, hey, I like the look of this, I'll give this a shot. Now, I don't know that 2000 AD is addressing that audience with the vigor that it should. From my limited knowledge, they're not. They are generally pursuing, what should we call it, the comic shop audience, the traditional fan base it's got, which is absolutely right that they should. But if you want to attract kids, the audience that I absolutely crave for and go for and have gone for is that kid who's never fucking heard of who I am or never heard of who the artist is, and he picks it up on a newsstand and says, hey, this looks quite good. I don't know who the fuck this guy Mills is, but this looks all right. Because that's brilliant. It's not relying on a CV that goes back far too long. And that, I don't know that 2000 AD is addressing that. And my limited knowledge from sales on Spacewalk, which did reflect that newsstand audience, and we were very pleasantly surprised by, suggests, yeah.
I do remember when I was reading 2000 AD, it was like, you know, if there was a movie like Convoy came out with Chris Christopherson, you know, you'll probably remember the song We've Got a Great Old Convoy was by McCall, was at #1 in the UK for God knows how long. And yeah, long time, very long time. And you know, next thing you knew, we had Ace Trucking in 2000 AD. If there was a movie, then suddenly 2000 AD would go, okay, how can we replicate the cool stuff from that film, but make it a bit more science fiction-y? Let's put it in here, and we got it. And one of the strips that I thought did that really well, which took a lot of things from a lot of different movies, old movies, but I'm amazed that there hasn't. Again, we go Rebellion, but I'm amazed that there hasn't been a TV series of this. Is Harry 20 on the High Rock, written by Jerry Finley Day and artist Alan Davis. I absolutely love that story, and the scene where all the guards break out of all the prisoners break out and they start overpowering the guards really reminded me of the sequence in the James Bond film The Spy Who Loved Me, where all the submariners all break out, but Bond breaks them out of their imprisonment. They break into the armory, they get all the weapons, and they start battling through the ship to try and get to the control room. It's one of the best action sequences ever directed in a movie, and I thought, oh yeah, this is like The Spy Who Loved Me, and I could picture it in my head. And then they're trying to get to the upper levels, and you've got these guys with machine guns keeping them pinned down, and that's the ultimate 20-minute action sequence in a fantastic film, or it's the ultimate 20-minute action sequence at the end of a TV show. And I just thought the writing was superb in that. The twist of the guy turning out to be an android was fantastic. You know, there were sort of nods to kind of Chateau d'If and these kinds of stories, the Count of Monte Cristo. There were those kinds of elements in that. That for me is one of my favorite, probably a strip that a lot of people have forgotten, I think. But
well, I think that's, I'm so thrilled that you mentioned that, because Jerry, I think, has been rehabilitated to a large extent today, and I like to think I played some small role in that. But there was a period of time where he was almost a victim. Well, he was a victim of cancel culture, which made me very effing angry. Jerry was very much my mentor, and he often, I haven't kept in touch with him the last few years, but maybe going back 8 years, something like that, he would tell me about some of his ideas, and they still have that freshness that you've described with Harry 20. He's some of the absolutely amazing ideas he comes up with. And it was just like his face didn't fit at a certain point, and he basically got cancelled on his various stories. And I always thought that was a great tragedy, because what you've really got to do with, I mean, you'll know this doubtless, when you're dealing with creatives, we've all got Achilles heels. We've all got flaws in what we do. So you've got to work with the flaw and promote the things that are really good. And the opposite happened where Jerry was concerned. And that's what made me, as you can still see, I'm still quite ferocious today, because I could see that as I watched Jerry being cancelled, I could see that I might be lined up next. And I thought, no fucking way. And so I really went to town on things. And I think reverse the process, which means if you speak up, you can actually change things. It make it too difficult for these people who just think, hey, let's get rid of Jerry because now we can get other people to write his stories, which is what happened. But Jerry was often had some absolutely brilliant ideas, and just like the rest of us, he had one or two shit ideas, and we all of us from time to time have written some odd shit stories. But he kind of got singled out, And it's the system that produces it. Whereas if you said to Jerry, hey, Jerry, you've got 6 weeks to work on whatever it is you're doing, to polish it and come up with something absolutely brilliant, he'd have done it. He's still a great, great writer.
Got one last question here for you from the chat. What anime films have you watched or enjoyed, if anything? Are you a fan of the anime, and are you watching any of the stuff like Arcane is a particularly good show on Netflix at the minute that, Pat, you would definitely enjoy. I can tell you now, if you're looking for something to watch, check out Arcane.
I'm feeling quite guilty, actually, because my wife Lisa would absolutely love to watch some of these animes, and I always go, no, it's got to be live action and all this kind of stuff. But I should particularly pay attention to anime because our series Requiem has been made into, or is being made into, a manga comic, and it may well end up as an anime, because the whole process by which they make this character accessible to this huge audience that manga has and anime has is going on for Requiem. So I really I should be doing it, and I'm beating myself up here a bit. You know, the other thing I should be doing, and it didn't work out first time around, but I should really look at it, is webtoons. Because, you know, there's that whole Korean thing, and a particular publisher offered me a webtoon setup, and it didn't work out for various reasons. But I like to pursue these directions because they are mainstream. They're the equivalent of the newsstand comic. So that's why they interest me. So thank you for prompting me. I should really go for anime.
I think that one in particular will be one that you'll enjoy. These guys have been badgering me into watching it. I've seen the first episode now, and it is absolutely
What's
fantastic.
It called again?
It's Arcane.
Right. I'm going to write that down.
It's got 2 seasons on Netflix. I do have your email, Pat, so I can always send you a reminder as well. Did you ever watch any of the Studio Ghibli movies, like Howl's Moving Castle, those kinds of things?
That's more delicate. It's more gentle, isn't it? Howl's. I remember watching some of that, and once again, my wife Lisa, I seem to remember she said, "Oh, this is really gorgeous," and I seem to remember my reaction was a bit old school 2000 AD, like it's a bit airy fairy.
Well, there aren't a lot of scenes of people breaking into the armory and grabbing machine guns. I will give you that.
That's what's missing for me. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I when I broadened my taste as I got older, I thought I need to see some calm spiritual stuff as well, and that definitely hit that.
I think button. I think I still need to as well.
Yeah.
Well, I've still got to widen my consciousness a bit. Yeah.
I mean,
but I remember seeing bits of it and thinking this is very stylish. But I think I've become so focused on what is going to sell for me personally and what is going to sell at the box office that it sometimes is a limiting factor. It means that you could miss out on what could otherwise be called something a bit art house or a bit gentle. And I'm so focused on that particular audience that I've successfully fulfilled over the decades that you can sometimes forget there's a world out there on either side of this world. So thank you for the reminder. I probably need it.
Well, as we've come to the recommending films and TV shows to Pat's section of the evening, I will give you a strong recommendation because I just know this will be right up your street. You should watch Sisu if you haven't seen it already, which is a one-off World War II movie with a slightly dystopian feel to it about a group of Germans retreating from the Russian front, and they come across a guy who happens to have dug up a bit of gold, and they basically try to kill him and take it from him. And it's almost like this was adapted from a 2000 AD strip. It's insanely violent. It's very stylish. This guy takes on the Germans all by himself, and it's an amazing film.
Very spaghetti western, isn't it? Very
How's
spaghetti
it
western.
spelled? Sisu.
Yeah, it's SISU. It came out in 2022, and Pat, trust me, it's going to be right up your street.
It sounds like it. Yeah. No, I like the sound of that.
Your wife might hate me for suggesting it, but you're gonna love it. You're gonna love it. So yeah, that's another one I would definitely.
Sisu. Okay, I shall check that out. Definitely.
Well, look, we've kept you on for over 2 hours. We're gonna wrap things up. First of all, I want to thank everybody in the chat. We've had quite a few new people watching and commenting. Welcome to the channel. The industry interviews are the core of what we do. This is actually number 86. I thought it was 85. It's number 86. Pat, you've been one of the most fantastic and high-profile guests we've ever had. We had Gail Ann Hurd on a couple of weeks ago, who produced, of course, the first 2 Terminator films and Aliens and things of that nature. And I had a conversation with her off camera and mentioned you were coming on, and she's a big fan. So
that's nice.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic woman, amazing guest, so kind with her time as well. Tombi and myself, incidentally, how this conversation started is Tombi and myself said on our on my channel at some point we were going to do our top 5 2000 AD stories. I'm not sure when we're going to do that stream yet, because we're still trying to work out the schedule. But when we do that, if you're available and you want to jump on for like the last 20 minutes to see what we've come up with, it would be quite interesting to get your opinion on our choices. So I'd love
to know your choices, because I think it's important to keep in touch with those the different audiences, which are also very much age generation related. So people who started with 2000 Prog 1 are different to the what shall we say, the mid 80s audience, and there are even mid 90s audiences who I've occasionally had slight run-ins, because that was an era of what you might call hostility towards the classic era, and then you've got a period of peace, which is down to Matt Smith at Rebellion, which it can often get neglected. I'm as guilty of that as anyone, but they rescued it from absolute. It was heading for the rubbish heap. It really was. And okay, it may not be the golden age that you guys love, but all credit to Matt Smith and Rebellion. Despite my many differences with them, they rescued it, and that's a hell of an achievement. I mean, it's not an easy thing to do, to bring a comic that's going down like that, and to bring it up and keep it going. So, well done to them.
Well, look, Pat, thanks so much for coming on. I'm just going to mention before we end quickly what I've got coming up. So, as you know, those people that are watching, the main purpose of the channel is to support independent creative people who are passionate filmmakers, board games designers, musicians, novelists, whichever one of those you may be. If you've got a project that you've been working on, like my guest next week, producer Michael Haber-Falena, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. He's gonna no doubt correct me on the day. He spent a couple of years making this film, There's No Such Thing as Zombies, independent screenwriter, producer, made it pretty much from nothing, not a big budget. He's going to be on next week talking about that. I also have actress Cindy Pickett coming on next week. For those people who don't know who she is, she played Ferris Bueller's mother in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. But more importantly, she played opposite the late, great Chris Christopherson in the mini-series America, spelt with a K, which was about the dystopian Russian invasion or post-invasion of America, and what happened as they tried to start dividing it up She's also been in Roger Corman films like The Deep Star Six and various other television shows, has an extensive career on stage. So I've got several other fantastic guests booked already, although it's going to be hard to top this one, Pat. Hard to top this one. Someone has said in the chat, only Alan Moore could top this guest. I'm not sure what I'm not sure what Pat's opinion is on that.
Alan who?
Alan who? Yeah, I'm not sure I'm going to get Alan Moore to come on. I don't think he's very amenable.
Why not? Why not? Yeah.
Well, hey, listen, if you want to put a word in for us, Pat, please do.
I don't have his ear, but I know he would have a completely exciting and different perspective on all the things that we've been talking about, and it'd be great to see that. Yeah.
Well, before we go, let's just plug the Kickstarter again. As I mentioned to people, it is up and running. Ignore the fact that they've hit their target. They want you to purchase more books because the important thing is the size of the print run. So if you want to check out the latest creation from Pat and, of course, his creative partner on this project, Oliver Ledois. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Brilliant.
Thank God I remembered. I'm so terrible with names. Check that out. I've just dropped the link in the chat. It is on Kickstarter right now. I'm also going to remind my guests that on December the 1st, my next novel is coming out, which is called Silver Screen Journeys. Even Pat may find this interesting. This is almost like a diary of 101 plus times that I went to the movies from 1974 right through until 2024, who I went to the movies with, where I saw these films, what these films meant to me at the time, and what they mean to me now. And there's a forward for the book from my good friend, The Critical Drinker, who's got slightly more subscribers than us on YouTube. He's got 2,100,000, I think. And climbing.
Wow.
Yeah. He has
so your book is called Silver Screen Journals?
Silver Screen Journeys. That's coming out.
Journeys.
Yeah, it's coming out on Amazon on the 1st of December. And it's quite I wasn't quite sure what it was when I was writing it at the beginning, but it's every film that I've seen that's stayed with me is attached to a specific memory of time. So
that's pretty cool. And I think you're Robert McKee, the guy who wrote Story, he used to slip into cinemas as a little boy. So, and I remember him talking about this experience of it. So I think you've really hit a vein of gold there. And I'm thinking to myself, shit, that's really good. I wish I'd come up with that. Well, that's great.
I've never
Silver
read
Screen Journeys, because it presses a button in all of us. All of us have memories of watching a movie when you're 10, 11, 12, 15, 16, it's attached to very personal shit,
Yeah. So you've got things like, which movie I saw with my first girlfriend, what was the first movie I saw with my father, what was the last movie I saw with my father.
Man, that's great.
So all of those stories are in there, in addition to, when I started leaning into becoming a writer director, what were the films that influenced me, who were the first actors that I started to follow. And in fact, I used to have a big list of actors on my wall, and I've actually retyped that up and put it at the back of the book so you can see which actors I started to follow first, which ones I wanted to work with.
Send me the link to that, and I will definitely give it a plug. And I will certainly, when you put it up on Amazon, I'll certainly read the first chapter. The reason I don't read much beyond there is because I barely read my own shit. Never mind anybody else's.
That's not a problem.
But you've hit something really good, and I'm thinking to myself, God, I wish I could remember. I mean, I have vague memories of my various, what should we call it, seminal movies. But it sounds like you've got a really good angle there. So well done for that.
Well, there's a big section missing in the middle because I did take I had a brain injury in the early 2000s, and it wiped out about 10 years of my memory. There's even 2 plays in my portfolio that I can't remember directing. So one of the things that I do have in a box behind me up on the shelf is I have all of the cinema ticket stubs from all of the movies that I went to see. So I've got all of those. In fact, I'll show you quickly before we go off there, because it's right here. And then here's, I don't know if you remember this place. I don't know if you remember this place, Pat, but there's a bag for 58 Dean Street Records that used to sell nothing but film soundtracks in Soho. Don't know if you remember that place.
I think I do, but
yeah,
I'm just envious that you held on to your film stubs.
So,
I mean, you see, you've got that collector attitude, which I don't have, and sometimes I wish I did. But I think that's really good. And even your missing period, those missing years, somehow that adds a drama to the whole thing, because you've got, like, because of a brain injury, you've got that you know that there are ways you possibly could get back those memories. Did you know that?
I have enough trouble remembering last week these days, so I'm quite happy not to have to remember everything. This is look. This is the box of all the tickets. So, I mean, you are talking.
That's phenomenal.
Look.
Wow.
Because I used to go to the cinema, and I worked at even when I worked at the cinema, and I worked at the cinema for several years. On my days off, I would still travel up to town and still go and see films, because back then the big movies would stay in the West End for about 4 to 8 weeks before they were released around the rest of the country, so that they could see how the ticket sales were in the West End, and they would gauge that, because I then worked as a booker for Canon much later. So
what did you do at the cinema? Were you an usher or a projectionist?
I started off as an usher. Then I was on the till selling the tickets. And that was nice, because I could recommend to people what films to watch. And then I became an assistant manager, and then I moved on. But it was Granada when I first started working there, and then it was, when it reopened, it was Granada again. Then it got bought out by Canon. Then it got bought out by MGM, and it went through a whole load of changes, the places that I worked at. But yeah, so that's kind of all in there as well. There's a whole load of
that sounds
stuff,
really rich. Now I will enjoy looking at that, because I think it's that lost era of escapism, which today's generation doesn't have, because you've got unlimited numbers of movies, but you have that very special, secretive era where everything is so dark, and the films run on rotation again and again, and probably things that don't apply to your generation but apply to mine. Like, I can distinctly remember they always played God Save the Queen at the end, and everybody made a rush for the exit. and those people who'd served in World War II would look at us long-haired gits with absolute disapproval. But there's that whole secret world of the cinema that is unique to every era, every decade's probably got its own ambience, but it sounds like you've really captured it.
Well, there's a big difference to seeing the opening night of Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring in the Odeon Leicester Square with 1,200 other people surrounded, in every seat around you, all waiting to see that movie, as opposed to watching it for the first time at home, while someone's talking on the phone and granddad's asleep in the armchair farting or whatever. You can only see a film for the first time once, and that's one of the first lines in the book. And what I'm trying to convey to the people is what the experience was of seeing each of these films.
It's a special experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not the same as watching a Netflix premiere.
No, indeed not.
It makes it sound so drab by comparison, but it's that excitement of queuing up cinema was extremely important to me as well. Obviously, it's a different generation, But similar rules, and I think you've really, I mean, I'm in awe that you've collected the stubs. God, if only I was a collector of things.
I just happened to put them all in one box, and I thought I'd lost them actually, but hey, all right. Well, look, sorry we kept you on for another 20 minutes with that little segue.
It was fine. It was.
Yeah.
I see this as like talking in a pub. To me, it's that's what it's like. So I have no problem.
Well, somebody on our chats are quite laid back. Somebody in the chat already said, "Get Pat back every Friday night. Let's make this a regular thing." I'm not sure we can impose on Pat's time that regularly, but you're welcome
We'll pick
to
up
come
again.
You're welcome to come back on the channel anytime.
All right.
We are all about supporting independent creative projects. That's why this channel is called The Outcast Creative, and that's what we're pushing to do. I've always worked, even as an independent film director, I've always worked on the outside. No one's ever let me in. No one's ever given me a load of money to go and make a film. Everything I've achieved, I've done on my own. That's the same with the stage plays, the play that I did about the post office scandal, which was on stage 3 years before the TV drama. We couldn't get the press to talk about it. Now everybody's talking about it, and there's 2 more plays that are coming out, and they're getting all the publicity. My play was first. And
how long did it run for? Dare I ask?
We did it at 4 different theatres for a week each. So
That's good.
And all the postmasters came to see it. Over 100 of them. Over 100 postmasters came to see it, and they loved it. And I've always been about supporting those kinds of social causes, and I've always been about supporting independent creatives. So when your next volume is coming up in this series, please come back and we will plug it for you again. We'll have you back on again. Maybe bring your French colleague with you if he wants to come on. He doesn't have to come on camera. If he's a bit shy, he can stay off camera. That's fine. But we would love to have you back. Love to have you back and talk about the second volume. Tell us how it's going. So consider this channel as a place where you can come and publicize anything you're involved with. You're welcome here anytime.
Thank you so much. That's really great.
And again, thank you for making a very significant artistic and creative contribution to my own personal creative journey. There's absolutely no doubt whatsoever that you're one of the individuals who's made a huge contribution towards my own artistic abilities and my writing abilities. So you played your role in that, and I wanted to thank you for that also personally. I'm
so thrilled. Thank you so much.
Well, on that bombshell then, Pat, sorry, you said you were going to say something else there.
No, that's it.
Okay, on that bombshell,
I'm going to button it.
I want to thank my co-hosts Tombi and the Inside Man, and
pleasure.
I know the Inside Man had some microphone issues, but it wouldn't be the same if Inside Man didn't have microphone issues. We are gonna there's no show this Sunday because this Sunday I'm away. We will be returning with our Sunday show in 2 weeks' time. We're back with the Nielsen ratings on Tuesday, and don't forget all the other industry interviews we've got coming up next week. I think there's at least 2, there might be 3. They're already all up on the channel, you can check. There's another 2 the following week. So thanks to everybody in the chat who's given comments and so on, and we're going to see you all again soon. Here comes the song.
Dreamers get innovative. It's film, TV, and theater in the mix. Industry interviews where ideas get their fix. He's creative, we're creative. How about you? Share your passion, join the legend, Galen Hurd. He's created